The summer I learned to listen to the harbour's breath. I was 12, and certain of nothing but the heat and the gulls. The town woke with the clank of ropes and the pale, patient light slipping along the pier. Our house was a white block of stone, perched where the water began to turn the colour of cold tea at the shore. Grandmother's kitchen held the stubborn warmth of a stove that did not understand holidays, and the air smelled of tea leaves, salt, and lemon zest that she pressed into a clean glass and handed to us with a hush and a smile, as if the world could hinge on a small bright sip. Outside, the day stretched like a clean sheet. The market sellers called to each other in lilting cries. The baker passed by with a tray of bread crusts crackling to the rhythm at his steps, and the harbour, when the wind turned, gave off a smell of old rope and brine, sharp and honest as a truth you confess aloud for courage. On the edge of town, where the road rose a little and pebbled into the path toward the boats, a sadness coiled in the corners of the day, but not a frightening sadness, more the quiet sadness of goodbyes held too long. It was a summer that reminded you of other summers you did not yet know you would have, of afternoons that would later become memory, and of the ways a single question could calm a room of busy hearts. The air was so warm it could have melted bread, and the light made everything look as if it were listening. Every storefront awning, every window with a curtain that fluttered like a small white flag. Our days fell into a rhythm. Grandmother rising early, radio hum in the corner, asking for songs that sounded like childhood. The kettle singing on the stove, the washing of cups and the careful arrangement of plates for the family meals that stretched past the last sliver of sun. My younger sister Mira and I wandered the quay after the workers had hauled in nets and a few boats rocked gently as if they were listening to the water's memory. We learned the harbour's breath not from grand speeches or lessons, but from the way the air moved around a man mending a net, or the way a boy learned to skip stones with a patient patience that felt like prayer in motion. One afternoon, when the heap lay heavy on the wooden planks and the boats wore their ropes like collars, I followed an old fisherman named Mr. Hannon to the shade of a weathered shack. His skin was the colour of the sea after rain, rough with sun and wind, and his hands carried the map of every crease the ocean had carved into him. He did not hurry. There was a why to every motion, a reason why he did not rush, even when the clock on the wall beside the shop ticked louder than the gulls. "Want to learn a small thing?" he asked, and his voice sounded like something old and honest, the kind that makes you lean closer, as if the world might open up if you listened hard enough. I nodded, because I wanted to learn all the small things that could stand between a day and the quiet of night. He handed me a frayed end of rope and a net that had seen better days. The net wore its weariness like a badge, every hole telling a story. He showed me the first knot, the knot you tie when courage feels light, the one that keeps a promise secure, even when the sea threatens to pull you out of yourself. Then he taught me to turn the net inside out, to search for the stubborn knots that had slipped loose, to catch the glint of light on the line and guide it toward repair rather than replacement. The snag of the net's mouth sat stubbornly stubborn, as if the sea itself had snagged it for a prank. The line snagged and snapped, and I wanted to pretend I did not see the slight tremor in the old man's hands, as if he too remembered the times when a knot refused to hold. But he did not hurry me. He leaned in with a quiet care and whispered, "Every knot is a small promise. If you break it, You owe a little more to the thing you promised to hold. We worked side by side, Mira perched on a nearby crate and watching with a mix of fear and fascination, as if watching someone mend a broken heart with thread. The smell of tar and salt grew thicker in the air, and a distant shout from a boy playing catch drifted over the water, followed by a laugh that rode the breeze and touched the corner of my mouth in a way that felt almost like forgiveness. My fingers learned a language they had not known before, the careful pull of the rope, the tiny bite of the needle, the way the thread travels in and out, always seeking a place to belong. The work was slow and steady, nothing dramatic, just a series of deliberate choices that added up to something strong and useful. The net began to regain its shape, and when the last knot held, I felt a strange, almost holy quiet settle into me, as if the world had exhaled and I could hear the harbour more clearly for it. Mr. Hannon stepped back and studied the net, as if the sea itself stood watching from a distance, weighing whether a life could be saved with one small act of fixing. He did not smile in triumph, not exactly. It was more a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. He looked at me with eyes that had once been young and fiery in storms, and told me softly, "You see, a net is a map of a day's weather. You mend it to keep the day from drifting away. A life, too, is a net, kid. You mend the hurt you find in it, not to erase the weather, but to give it room to pass through." That afternoon, the boats began to hum with the gentle business of evening. Laughter rose from the quay like a chorus to the sea. Grandmother brought us lemonade that tasted of lemon zest, brightened with sugar and the memory of 100 summers. The air cooled a little and carried the scent of seaweed and roasted coffee from a distant window. The harbour seemed to exhale with us, a big, patient sigh that told us the day had earned its rest. In those days, the world felt porous, as if the edges between my life and the lives of the people around me could be nudged with a soft touch, and the shape of tomorrow would tilt toward something hopeful. The little tasks, folding a towel just so, wiping the kitchen table until the grain of the wood showed its honest colour, listening to a grandmother speaking of her own youth with a tenderness that did not demand memory, but invited it, taught me that care is a form of attention, a verb you practice without fanfare until it becomes a part of your weather. Looking back now from this slow century of days, I can still hear the slap of the harbour water as it slapped the hulls and then fell away, as if the sea itself were turning a shy eye toward us, granting a moment of mercy for our small lives. The kneading of dough on a Sunday afternoon, the way the sun carved pale gold lines on the kitchen table, the soft clink of the mug when grandmother poured the tea. These sounds, these textures, they did not shout their lessons. They did not demand they be remembered. They simply asked to be noticed, to be kept in a pocket of memory, where they could breathe when the world grew loud. What that day at the net did for me, almost without my knowing it, was to teach the worth of patient work and the dignity of small, faithful acts. If a life can be trusted to be repaired rather than discarded, then perhaps it can withstand the weather that comes and go, the seasons that insist on change. Years later, I would tell my own children that a home is not built by grand gestures, but by the countless little mends, the hems re-sewn, the arguments paused, the promises kept, the doors left open a crack for someone to enter when they need to be alone with the quiet light of dusk. The harbour kept teaching me, even when I forgot its words for a while in the rush of youth. Patience is not passive. It is the gentle art of staying present with what hurts, and what heals, of choosing to bind rather than cast aside. Time moves like the tide, inexorable and generous in its return, giving back what we lay down in its sands, the memory of a hand steady at the loom, a voice that knows when to listen more than to speak, a child who learned to trust the quiet strength of a promise kept. Now, years later, I walk slowly along the quay at twilight and feel the same breath on my skin, the same harbour's sigh that I felt that long summer ago. Though the world has grown larger around me, and more complicated than the nets we mended, the air carries a hint of brine and lilac from a neighbour's garden, and the boats ride the water with the patience of old friends who have learned to arrive exactly when they intend. I have learned to tell the story of that afternoon, not as a single act of repair, but as a constellation of small salvations, little threads by which a life can be held together when the weather turns stern. If you asked me what that memory has meant to me, I would say it is the quiet discipline of care, the habit of seeing a thing through to the end, of letting a small hurt be mended rather than hidden. It is the way a child learns that the world does not demand grand miracles of us, only faithful hands and a willingness to try again when knots come loose. I think it is also the stubborn tenderness that holds a person to a family and a place. The sense that we belong to each other as surely as the nets belong to the boats, as surely as the harbour belongs to the horizon. And so, in old age, I am grateful for that 12-year-old afternoon when the harbour spoke to me in quiet, ordinary language, the language of knots and patience and small promises kept. Time has taken much from me, but not the memory of that day, nor the knowledge that a life can be saved, or at least steadied, by the many little repairs we perform with gentle hands and a patient heart. I carry it still, the lesson that to mend is to care, that to care is to endure, and that to endure is to remain capable of wonder. The sea's breath returns with every breeze, the memory of the old net, crisp and bright in my mind, the way the early evening light pooled on grandmother's kitchen table, as though it were a blessing laid down for the sake of a small, ordinary life that somehow became a kept promise when I grew old enough to understand. And I am grateful for the long, slow time that has given me the wisdom to see that meaning is not a single thread, but a weave, a pattern of many hands mending, many voices listening,